My name is Opoka Paaropoto, and you're most welcome to the third episode of Asylum, an investigative podcast series co-produced and presented by me and made possible with support from the Pulitzer Center. I'm busy dialing into a Zoom call with an old colleague who is still living in South Sudan.
Having been in the field now for for more than 6 years, I have encountered a lot of challenges on my behalf. The first challenge I experienced was when the government shut down our newspaper.
This is Garang Abraham Malak. He is in his 20s and has his whole career ahead of him. He also freelances for the Nation Media Group, which is the biggest media company in the East African region. The question is it worth him staying as a journalist in South Sudan or trying something different or even trying to get out? Since June 2016, I have been a refugee in the Netherlands. Only a few months ago, I was made a Dutch resident. However, today, I am now a full Dutch citizen. In episode 1 of my investigative podcast series Asylum, I tell the story of South Sudanese journalist Woja Emmanuel. The production process was exhilarating, often driven by the adrenaline of news and project deadlines. However, when I learned that the National Security Services in Juba were listening to our podcast, it was a stark reminder of the malicious interests within the security services. These interests were far from national, seemingly aimed at stifling dissent and strangling press and media freedoms. Another challenge was ensuring the safety of Woja Emmanuel, whose only crime was sharing his story. He hoped that his abductors, who tried to end his life by administering methanol poisoning, would one day be brought to justice. For me, episode 1 is a constant reminder of the emotional and psychological toll of escaping persecution as a journalist or any citizen defending human rights. Let's get back to talking to Garang.
We ran a story that was published by Senatory in the US that mentioned President Riek Machar having profited from the war that happened in 2015 and 2016. So the paper was shut down.
The publication was called the Nation Mirror newspaper, and it was published in Juba by the Indian-owned Ganesh Printers Company Limited.
And so my boss managed to escape to Nairobi and later went to Switzerland. And then my news editor also managed to escape to Nairobi. And me, who was very naive in the media field, I had nowhere to go. I never had an idea of the institution I would report to give me my support. And it became very challenging.
Garang was also part of the team that went to visit Ding Magot, who we spoke to in the last episode, when she was arrested for interviewing members of a protest group.
My phone was being tracked in and out. So I felt very threatened. I couldn't sleep for 2 days.
Keep in mind that this was Garang's first job.
I look at that as a violation of my rights. And I never had the capacity. I was just naive, never had any money to flee anywhere. I was just so new in the media field. There was nowhere to turn to.
Salva Kiir Mayardit was born on September 13, 1951, in Barghazal, in what was then Sudan. He joined the Sudanese civil wars, and Kiir became the SPLM leader and vice president of the Sudan. On July 9, 2011, he became the first president of South Sudan. The conflict began in December 2013 when President Kiir accused Vice President Dr. Riek Machar of attempting a coup. This accusation led to a civil war primarily between the Dinka, Kiir's ethnic group, and the Nuer, Machar's ethnic group. From 2013 to 2015, there was widespread violence and displacement, and in August 2015, a peace agreement was signed, but it faced many challenges. And in July 2016, renewed fighting caused further instability across the country. And in 2018, a revitalized peace agreement led to a unity government that was formed in 2020. Severe crisis with famine and over 4 million displaced and widespread human rights violations. The conflict also devastated infrastructure and economy, leading to international aid dependence. Garang's family were able to pull him out of Juba.
What my dad did was first, he took me out of the residential area I was in. And after that, we have an uncle that operates an airline company in Juba. So I didn't go via the main terminal. I was taken at the back, taken to board for some time.
One of the articles that Garang wrote was on the eviction of SPLM-IO politicians from hotels in Juba. The government of President Salva Kiir did not want any news stories in the press that would appear to garner the opposition group any public and international sympathy. At the same time, the Nation Mirror had already had 2 articles removed prior to publication by the National Security Service officers deployed at the printing press. Garang is friends with Wajah Emmanuel, who we spoke to in a previous episode, and similarly has an issue with how management in South Sudan handles the safety of their journalists.
Media managers in this country, to me, do not pay attention to their staff, their junior staff. So if anything happens to you, you do it your way. And this is not happening to me alone.
The National Security Service in South Sudan monitors journalists and activists closely. One byline can land you in their crosshairs. They start gathering detailed information about you, who you are, your background, and your daily activities. They then track your media work, making you a person of interest. I have had numerous interactions with national security agents disguised as journalists, activists, or NGO workers. This is not paranoia. My situation worsened after public statements and radio talk show appearances in 2013, where I warned of impending conflict and criticized the constitution review process and media laws. My editorials against the National Security Bill further aggravated the situation. The National Security Service Bill in South Sudan was literally a copy and paste of Sudan's law. The replication was so blatant that references to Sudan and names from the original document appeared in the text that was presented in Parliament.
I'm working on 2 investigative stories, of which I feel like I cannot release them as soon as I want because I might be exposed to dangers, or I might be separated from my family because at the end of the day, threats will come. If I survive being killed, then I will be arrested. And if I'm arrested, even if the support comes later, it will be too late to get me out of the cells. If my phone can be tracked, my location can be identified. And if my location is identified, what is next? To have myself eliminated. And if you're arrested, cases can be created against you and you can be sentenced to prison for several years over a case that does not exist. Before I release these 2 investigative pieces, I'll reach out to these people and we have a plan in advance before I release them. That's what I've been having in mind. I mean, I don't want my family to lose me because I'm a breadwinner supporting a family of more than 15 people. So imagine if I am eliminated, where will these people feed? So this automatically brings in self-censorship, which is not healthy, because the more I continue to hold these stories, the more people will be affected. Yeah. And if I'm rushed to release it, the more I'll be eliminated fast and I lose it all, or my family lose it all.
One of the stories Garang had been working on is oil and pollution in South Sudan, and particularly how it affects the health of women and children, including being born with deformities. There are, of course, also stories on extrajudicial killing that Garang has been covering, especially those being carried out by authorities.
So I've had 2 interviews with different parents that have lost their relatives. Like there's a woman in Bor that lost his 2 children, mature children, that were killed, that were executed in Juba because they had a complicated court case.
In my case, I have a long record of arrests, beatings, and other extreme experiences like having my head shaved and being accused of being a spy for the Sudanese army. I was trained with the belief that if you're being arrested, it means you're doing good journalism.
During COVID-19 time, there's a story I wrote about corruption-related story with the Minister of Health. There were a lot of donation happening, a lot of like a check from IGAD, there were a lot of donation coming in from China. So I had an interview with the Undersecretary and I asked him, so far there have been a lot of donation happening. Where are the donations? Where are the COVID funds? And the Undersecretary told me that it was not your media business to ask where the donations were happening.
Even though I am always making comparisons between the present and the past of South Sudan, there are, according to Garang, a few positives from the current state.
Honestly, Opoka, there is a little of an improvement compared to your time before you left the country and now. The little improvement I can say is a little bit by media authority. It has positioned itself in a space whereby some government officials at times, instead of just going to attack the journalists or going to shut down the media house, they first go to media authority, something which was not there, especially for Juba. So most of government officials, if they feel like, we are being defamed, this institution has run a fake story about me, instead of going direct to shut down the media house, especially the military, they normally first go to media authority, which was not there during your time. So I would say that there is a little bit of an improvement.
However, we were promised after I left everything would be fixed and we would have freedom. And this has, of course, not happened.
The reality is the threats continues, arrest continues, intimidation continues. The Media Authority Director General, when he was asked why journalists were thrown out of parliament, take a look at how he responded. He said, there are some places in the world where some people don't see the sun. This applies to you as journalists. There are some places where you should not shine your cameras. This is the media authority that is supposed to protect or advocate for journalists, saying that there are some places where you should not shine your cameras because there is a reason. Stories are not only in parliament. Look at that statement coming from the media regulation body. The media authority that is supposed to regulate the media institution has even some, it is alleged, I will not say, in that body, there are also members of the national security. Look at that. If that is happening, which government regulation body will now protect the journalists or mediate between the journalists and the government?
I wanted to get a perspective from Dr. Colin Lasso. He is a senior journalist and a trainer from South Sudan for inspiration and information and what we can do next.
Well, to be honest, the death of Peter Moy was the one that impacted me the most.
In August 2015, President Kiir threatened journalists, saying, and I quote, "If anybody among journalists does not know that this country has killed people, we will demonstrate it one day on them," end quote. Shortly after this statement by the president, journalist Peter Julius Moy was killed, raising concerns about media safety.
This was a fellow who I had known, right? And such a down-to-earth fellow, right? The veterans of South Sudanese journalism were covering hard stuff like the war and, politics.
Before his untimely death, Moy was researching a story on the misuse and embezzlement of the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, in the South Sudan National Legislative Assembly.
He was a business reporter, for God's sake. Now, the question is, was he killed for his journalism or was he killed for some other personal reasons? There are theories out there.
Colin was away from South Sudan but returned in 2005 after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed. However, he has since returned to Oklahoma in the United States, where he is a citizen. Together, we conducted numerous journalism capacity building trainings between 2010 and 2012. One of the biggest challenges journalists face is lawlessness and a total disregard for their rights and freedoms. In 2012, while conducting field research for an investigative story on oil and gas in Bentiu, two security officers turned a simple outdoor photograph opportunity into a very dangerous situation. They accused me and two colleagues of violating South Sudanese laws, although they could not specify which ones. We were falsely accused of being spies for the Sudanese government, allegedly taking pictures for aerial bombing campaigns. If a summary procedure had been conducted, we might have faced a firing squad. Fortunately, my security training helped me de-escalate the situation. There is little shame in accepting slaps from someone clearly much younger, especially when they have an AK-47 and a knife dangling on their waist. Sadly, these officers took pleasure in our misery, laughing with each slap. This was not an evening I want to remember. The ordeal, including humiliation, sexual harassment of my female colleagues, and physical abuse, was terrifying. However, it pales compared to the near-death experiences of a Darfuri journalist working for the then Sudan Radio Service's sister project, Darfur News Service, Muhammad Arku.
When Muhammad was arrested, they accused him, among other things, was that he was a spy for the Sudan embassy in Nairobi. Why? Because the fellow who apparently arrested him had seen him at the Sudan embassy in Nairobi. We're like, okay. Then the story changed. They said, well, he's got numerous IDs with different names on them. He was there in his official capacity as a reporter for our sister project, the Darfur News. In fact, part of the reason he went to WOW was to sort of report on the people who had fled Darfur because of the conflict in Western Sudan and had now settled in WOW and how they were moving on with their lives. Do some health-related story, do some human interest story, do some business-related story, so that, those could be played out over time. So he's arrested, and the way he told me the story is that when he was handed over to the barracks, the SPLA barracks in Busere, he's been arrested. That's why we brought him to you, and he's been masquerading as a journalist for Sudan Radio Service, but that's not true. This is what he's doing. And of course, these guys promptly grabbed him and proceeded to just rain on him, beating him. They beat him so badly that he couldn't even stand on his own, and then they threw him into that hole in the ground prison type of a setup, and they kept him there. Now, how I got involved in this, because I was the next senior administrative type in this, in addition to the radio station. Then the story changed again. Well, he is being held pending investigations. Whose investigations? Well, national security investigation. Okay.
What crime did journalists commit to deserve death, imprisonment, or disappearance in a country where ethnic militia warlords are rewarded with military promotions and political accolades?
This public information officer calls me from WOW, said, hey, we have arrived. We're at the airport. We're waiting for somebody from the governor's office to come and pick us up. So when they got to the governor's office, they were told, well, this is now a national security case, and the case has been referred to Juba. Mohammed will be transported to Juba by road. And my heart sank, and I'm like, come on, man. Well, you might as well just kill the guy when he was still at the barracks, and at least we'll have a body. I mean, this is the weird, logic that sometimes we end up rationalizing this thing, as opposed to a guy being killed out in the bushes, his body never to be found. And that was immediately what I thought, that, this is just going to be an excuse, because what vehicle are they going to use to drive from WOW to Juba? It's likely going to be a pickup, and he's probably going to be tied up. If they did that tying whereby your elbows from both hands are pulled behind your back, are touching each other, and then you're tied, literally a person, road is rough. I don't know the way these guys could happen. They could easily say, hey, the guy fell off. you know, and didn't survive. Fortunately, these U.S. Embassy people were said, hey, listen, since you're saying that he is to be transported to Juba for an investigation, well, we have a plane, and we can take him along with us to Juba, and you can even put your officer on the plane. Totally in violation of security protocols of the embassy to allow an armed fellow to get on a diplomatic missions plane. But they obviously did that because they had the forethought that, hey, that long journey between Wau and Juba, this guy would not survive. And that was the wisest thing they did. When the plane took off, for Juba, we got wind of it. Omiri and I went to the airport because we wanted to have a visual of him. What did he look like? They didn't want him to talk. It was just the shirt, trousers on him and some slippers. I mean, if you met this guy, you would have just thought he was any other prisoner. He had lost weight in the couple of weeks they kept him there. And so we wanted assurances. And we asked these guys hard questions. They said, well, we know he has been beaten while he was still in Wau and in Busere. Please do not beat him here because this makes the government look bad that somebody who is in your hands, is being beaten, was being tortured. This does not look good because now the U.S. ambassador is involved in this. Pretty soon they will be calling the president. This thing went down literally 4 months before independence. And then this guy, this junior officer, I didn't even get a name, says, well, since we have affirmed that he is not a danger to the plan for independence, we are planning to keep him until after independence. And I'm like, crap, man, come on. Yeah, I mean, like, really, why? Get out of this while you're still ahead, man. There's nothing here. The bigwigs, the who's who of them, I don't even know any of the names. They never introduced themselves. Had said, okay, there's no investigation. This guy is innocent. Process him and let him go. But this junior guy took it as his mandate. So I suppose maybe he was thinking we would be cowered into paying. But obviously we were not going to go that route. We were sticking on the moral high ground that we didn't create this situation. You guys created it. So you have to do the right thing. But we made it a point that almost every day we were there. In retrospect, come to think about it, I didn't think they wanted to release him because he was looking so miserable. I mean, the legs just look so awfully weak in terms of just supporting himself. So when they kept him in detention, they kept him, I think, another 2 weeks. And really, in retrospect, I think that 2 weeks was for him to recover so that when he was released, he looked reasonable.
On Thursday, July 7th, in 2016, armed clashes between the South Sudan People's Liberation Army, SPLA, and South Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, SPLA-IO, occurred in Juba. It was unsurprising that soldiers, eager to show loyalty to their commander-in-chief, engaged in looting, raping, and killing innocent citizens. This was the case with the cold-blooded murder of journalist and community radio manager John Gatluak Mangwet Nial at the Terrain Hotel in Juba, where he had sought safety. On Friday, July 8th, Gatluak was briefly detained but released. 3 days later, he was gunned down. John died a needless death. His wife and children miss him deeply. His brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles, and friends and relatives can never fill that void. It's heartbreaking. Not only can being a journalist bring you closer to danger, but so can who you are and where you come from in South Sudan. While investigations cannot bring Gatluak back, they often have the potential to inflict more pain. Nonetheless, we hope that one day there will be justice for Gatluak's family, Julius's family, and for those who inflicted pain and suffering on Muhammad Arku. You have been listening to Asylum, co-produced and presented by me, Opoka Parop Oto. Our executive producer is Paul McNally. This is a production of Develop Audio. We produce podcasts like this one and train a growing network of journalists to create quality audio. The series was supported by the Pulitzer Center. Thank you all for joining me on Asylum.